The red wave has finally happened, and Donald Trump has been reelected the 47th President of the United States of America after last night's surprisingly not very close win against Vice President Kamala Harris. A big reason for this success last night for the Republicans is that they actually embraced early voting. Like in 2020, Donald Trump and his base were like, we should not do early voting. We were against it, and it might have cost them. I think Trump would have lost anyways, but it definitely didn't help. And then 2022 midterms, where Republicans were expected to do as well as they did last night, they didn't vote early, and 2022 was not a success at all for the GOP, but the Republican Party realized we need to embrace early voting if we want to win. Republicans were able to do that. They got people out to vote early, and that is why they slimmed the margins in like Pennsylvania and all that, and were even able to build leads in like Arizona and Nevada due to early voting. The blue areas of the country, like solidly blue states like New York, Connecticut, and Illinois, they all shift heavily to the right. Like New York shift over 10 points to the right. Like New York was only won by Harris by 12. Connecticut, a solidly blue state here in the New England area, only won by Harris by 11. And then Illinois, which always votes Democrat, have the big city of Chicago, was under 10 points. Compare that to states like Florida, Iowa, and Ohio, all states that not too long ago were considered swing states. Trump won Florida by 13 points, which is more than 10 points the margin that he won in 2020. And he won Iowa and Ohio by double digits. And also, that Ann Selzer poll saying Harris, Iowa +3, that also did not age very well. But perhaps the biggest victory for Republicans last night, I thought, was in the state of Texas for the future of the party. I mean, for a while, Democrats have said, we're going to take back Texas, Blexus is coming. And for a while, it looked like the trends were there. Texas was a blue trending state. Trump only won it by 6 points. There's been some governor races that have been close there. But last night, it just wasn't close. Trump won Texas by 14 points, improving in Texas by 8 points. I mean, at this point, I have a hard time seeing Texas shifting so much to the point where they're even a swing state at this point, at least in the next, 15 years or so. Because it seems like they've maxed out support in, the urban areas in, San Antonio and Houston and Austin and all that stuff. Donald Trump also won the popular vote. For the first time in 20 years, a Republican won the popular vote. That has not happened since George W. Bush won in his second term in 2004 over John Kerry. Republicans also retake the House. They currently have 52 seats, with 6 states still counting votes. Republicans were able to flip the Senate seats in Montana and Ohio. Pennsylvania, right now at the moment, last I looked, Dave McCormick is ahead of incumbent Bob Casey. And Michigan looks really close. Wisconsin's probably going to go to the Democrats. So you're probably looking at around, I would guess, around 54, 55 seats for the Republicans, which is a big advantage for Trump to push his agenda. Even Kari Lake, who is very unpopular in Arizona, alienated a lot of people in 2022 after how she handled her loss in the governor's race. Even she is in a very tight race, and she could have a chance of winning, which, just shows how rough of a night it was for the Democrats. Kari Lake was considered like the right Stacey Abrams for a while, just couldn't win. Seems like just unelectable, but I'm not saying she's going to win. I think Gallego's probably the favorite still there, but considering how close it is, it's pretty surprising how close that is, and I don't think a lot of people expected that either. Now, those were the results from last night. Why did this happen? A first thing I think is that a lot of people were not happy about Kamala Harris being the nominee. Joe Biden was in there. They got Joe Biden there for 4 years in the White House. He was not very popular during his presidency, and the debate really sunk Biden's campaign. So the Democrats, I felt like, kind of just panicked and they went to Kamala Harris because if they didn't, it would have been bad optics for the Democrats. But they just felt like they had to go to Kamala Harris because they didn't want to do an open primary. And a lot of people just weren't fans of that. People really didn't trust Kamala's move to the center on a lot of issues. 5 years ago, Kamala Harris was considered a very progressive liberal on issues like immigration. Like she said, like Trump's wall's racist. And like she also said that like she's against fracking and all that stuff. And she switched her issues on the campaign, but clearly a lot of people just did not trust it. And people just didn't really believe what she was selling. Trump trials. Now, you can have your opinion on Trump. He's a very controversial figure. But, I mean, a lot of people feel that the Trump trials were politically motivated. A lot of people feel that way, especially on the right. A lot of people feel that way. And clearly, the convicted felon, being a convicted felon, narrative didn't really work very well for the Democrats. Like, a lot of people felt like it was a witch hunt. A lot of people felt like that this was anti-democracy. A lot of people felt that way. A lot of people feel that way about Trump too, but a lot of people just didn't feel right about the convictions against Trump and feel like Trump was being attacked by the media, legacy media like CNN, MSNBC. And that just wasn't on Harris's side, even though it's something that the campaign tried to focus on. It just didn't really hit with independent voters. And another thing is that Biden's economy was struggling. I mean, at least the interpretation of it was that Joe Biden, the economy under the Biden administration struggled. A lot of people were not happy with the situation at the southern border. And the cost of living has gone up in the last few years. And a lot of people just felt like they had enough of it and just turned out and voted for Trump. A lot of people just were not happy that they were paying more for groceries. And whether you blame it on Biden or not, it doesn't really matter. It really is the perception of that. And that is what drives votes. Also, Tim Walz was not a good pick for vice president. Clearly, especially after last night. Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. Minnesota shifted 3.5 points to the right. Clearly was not the right choice. I mean, people on the right have attacked Tim Walz for a lot of things. But the reality is that Tim Walz just didn't resonate with independent voters. A lot of independent voters thought Tim Walz was too extreme on the issues. They thought he didn't carry himself the right way. They thought he was weird in a way. Democrats tried to do that with J.D. Vance. It worked early on, but in the end, after the debate with Tim Walz, J.D. Vance's reputation overall, I would say, has gone up. They really, if they wanted to win, Josh Shapiro probably would have been a better choice because he's from a swing state of Pennsylvania, very popular governor. That probably would have given Harris a better chance to win, especially in Pennsylvania where Harris lost by almost 2 points. I don't think anyone saw Pennsylvania not being that close like it was last night. And Tim Walz isn't even from a swing state. He did not resonate with voters in the Midwest. He tried to do the Coach Walz thing, the I'm a football guy. It just didn't work. Bluntly, it just did not work. The Harris campaign, they did not have a lot of time. And it's hard when you only have 3.5 months. But clearly there were missteps made for the Harris campaign as well. Kamala Harris did not do very well in the primaries in 2020. She was one of the first people to drop out of the primaries in 2020. And I think that could have foreshadowed what happened last night, is that, to be honest, considering Harris was a very weak candidate, especially considering her performance that she had in the 2020 Democratic primaries, she was a very weak candidate. There was a lot of other candidates the Democrats could have gone with that would have been better suited to face off against Trump. I mean, the Harris campaign was just really, I'm not Donald Trump. Like, it just didn't resonate with a lot of people. It was just, I'm not Trump. I'm going to unite the country. A lot of people criticized Harris for not giving out exact plans on a lot of issues. And people just didn't really believe what she was selling, didn't really think she was competent, and she underperformed in a lot of rural areas. She just did not appeal to the working class of the country. And she didn't even really appeal to minority voters. Like, that was the thing Democrats were hoping for, is that Kamala Harris, hoping to make history, become the first female president, and not only that, the first black female president in the history of the country. They tried to go with that female president thing as well. It did not work for them with Hillary Clinton in 2016, and it did not work for them in Kamala Harris in 2024. It's not that a woman cannot be president. It just, these candidates did not work out, and the campaigns for the Democrats did not work out. And honestly, I know a lot of people are upset about this result. A lot of people are thrilled about this result, but in reality, even though Trump has a lot of baggage, this result is a little bit surprising considering how much of a blowout it was, but it's not that surprising that Trump won. I mean, I kind of thought Trump was going to win the whole time just because of how Harris performed in the 2020 Democratic primaries. And before she ran as president, her polling was really bad, but she had a surge in the polling early on. She got a lot of celebrities to show up. But, I mean, celebrity endorsements, they don't really do much. She just came off to a lot of people who are independents or maybe somewhat right-leaning and are dissatisfied with the Democrat Party. A lot of people are like, I don't like either candidate, but I think Trump's policies are better. I think that's what a lot of people felt last night. A lot of people felt that way. And Trump's base, also give credit to the Trump campaign for really expanding his base. He really increased his support with minority voters. The Puerto Rico joke clearly did not have an influence. I mean, Trump gained a lot with African Americans. He gained a lot with Hispanics. He gained a lot with Latinos. And that is a very concerning sign going forward for the Democrats, because that is the strong voter bloc they have, is those minority voters. And if they're starting to shift to the right, that could be a problem for the future of the Democratic Party. And that expanded Trump's campaign base. And it wasn't real. It was more of wasn't really like a traditional Republican campaign. Like a lot of the old school Republicans, like Liz Cheney, they were supportive of Kamala Harris. But what Donald Trump did have was people who felt that the country was going in the wrong direction and felt like that, although I don't love his personality, or I didn't think that he is that gentleman of a person, that his policies were better for the country. And his base turned out as well. The people that love him, the people that are Make America Great Again 24/7, those people showed out. The Trump diehards, they showed out. And it felt like the Trump diehards, from my sense, felt like they really want to win this election. Like, the Harris diehards did too, but I just got the sense that if Trump lost, they would have been devastated. I get the sense of that they would have been devastated, like really devastated, and probably would have been a lot of civil unrest in that situation, but they just really wanted it. The Trump supporters really, really wanted it, especially how they felt after the convictions. I think it only emboldened the Trump base. And I think that the base just really turned out for him. And as controversial as he is, you have half the country that just hates him, half the country that loves Donald Trump. And it's going to be an interesting next 4 years in this country with Trump as the president, for sure. I mean, a lot of people feel that Trump's going to be a dictator or stuff like that. Those accusations have been thrown at Donald Trump. And a lot of people are nervous. Whether you agree with it or not, a lot of people are nervous about the next 4 years. And would have been the same about Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris was not a good candidate at all. I mean, there's a lot of better candidates Democrats could have ran. Like, she just didn't have the same appeal as Biden did in 2020. Like, Joe Biden was able to appeal to, like, the working class. Kamala Harris didn't really appeal to any particular demographic, maybe other than the suburbs in Atlanta. Even black voters, last time we had a black candidate, Barack Obama got huge turnout from African American voters in 2008 and 2012. Harris couldn't replicate that. And whatever support she had over abortion rights, it just wasn't enough to make up for all the things that Trump had on his side. And it felt pretty early that where this race was going. And I felt like 9:30, I was like, I have a feeling where this race is going. Early in the night. And like, another thing is that the fact that this was called an election night is very surprising, and honestly might be a good thing for the country that did not drag out, because people can just get it over with and move on with their lives. Although a lot of people, there's civil unrest today. There'll be civil unrest for a while, because we are a very divided country. I mean, people on both sides think the other side sucks. And we're very divided. And Kamala Harris tried to bring the sense that she was going to unite the country, but a lot of people just didn't buy it like they did with Biden. Like, Biden appealed to, like, the Western Pennsylvania, the Scranton Joe part. He appealed to those people. He was an experienced politician. He'd been in Washington for 40 years. Like, Biden was like people weren't excited for Biden. But in 2020, like, you had civil unrest. Trump was very unpopular then. Biden was in a good position, the pandemic, all that. Biden was in a good position to allow the American independence, just return to normalcy. That was kind of the thing. We're going to unite the country. Clearly, after 4 years of the Biden administration, that is not how the American people feel. And Kamala Harris couldn't really distance herself from the Biden administration. Yeah, she tried. She didn't really have Biden at rallies, but it just wasn't enough to the voters. They wanted to see more out of Kamala Harris and what ideas she had for the country, and not just a continuation of the last 4 years. And a lot of it just felt like her campaign was Trump praises dictators, I'm not Trump, democracy's in the line. That can get your base out, but it just felt like that Democrats didn't have great messaging to the independent voters. And it didn't feel like they had concrete plans. I mean, they had some plans. Like, the one thing they did do that I would say probably appealed to some people is that they said they want to cut middle-class taxes. They said that I could see that was like the one thing I'm like, that's probably a good campaign strategy, because that felt like the one thing where it was like, I see what they're trying to do. But a lot of it just felt like they were talking about more what Trump is going to do. They're saying Trump's talking about how America's going backwards and under the Biden administration. And Kamala's campaign was upbeat. And that's great and all. It's great to be upbeat. It's great to have vibes. But what the voters cared about was, the voters thought that they were better off 4 years ago than they are today. That is what a lot of these voters thought. And that is why Trump won. And that is why he will be inaugurated in the White House in January. I'm Spence Kling, and that is my post-election analysis.